Don't you love it when shit goes full circle? So like when they introduced trigger warnings 10 years ago at universities, we all thought, this is fucking ridiculous, stop being such pussies. You're gonna have to be in the real world one day and there's no trigger warnings in the real world. Well, they've gone one step further now. The term trigger warning may be triggering. Cambridge University has put out guidance to avoid using the term trigger warning to avoid alarming students. This LBC article's titled, Top Uni Told Not to Use the Phrase Trigger Warning to Avoid Alarming Students. And we will look at it right after this quick ad. If you think today's technology is bad for privacy, virtual reality will be a nightmare. Along with being addictive, virtual reality is perfect for tracking everything a user does, sees, and feels in the virtual world, which will all be used to tailor laser-targeted advertisements towards them. This is why I won't get online without Virtual Shield VPN. Otherwise, my private data can be vulnerable to tech companies and hackers. I highly recommend Virtual Shield. Obviously, they're a long-time sponsor of the channel, and they are just great. Virtual Shield are offering 50% off this month, plus a free 30-day trial for all new customers. Just go to hidewithbear.com or click the link below to start your trial today. A top university has advised staff to avoid using the term trigger warning as not to alarm students and instead use the phrase content note. So it's going to be like, content note, trigger warning ahead, trigger warning, themes of violence and gore, and fucked up shit like that. Cambridge University has issued guidance saying the use of content notes is a far more neutral, descriptive term. This term also helps avoid unnecessary alarmism, particularly that which can arise due to the cultural connotations sometimes attached to the word trigger, the guidance reads. Oh, because trigger like as in gun, I guess. Or maybe they're just so used to crying when they see the word trigger warning that the word trigger itself is now triggering. I got triggered by the word trigger and I need a trigger warning for the triggers. Trigger, trigger, trigger. The university says examples of themes which may need content notes include death, representations of mental health issues, discrimination, illness, and animal abuse. The guidance states that content notes enable students to take the necessary steps to engage safely and with minimal psychological distress. Oh, that psychological distress. We're going to be talking about death and illness and health issues. Oh. How these students are going to cope in the real world is fucking beyond me. You know, there's a guy in Melbourne, right? I think his nickname was the Bone Collector, and this guy's speciality, right, is to go around the Melbourne train lines and pick up all the blood and the guts and the gore and the bones of people who have been smushed by trains, whether it was like an accident or suicide. Usually it's suicide. Do you reckon he gets a fucking trigger warning? What about all the rental agents and shit who don't hear from tenants for ages and knock on the door and eventually get access and they find a rotting dead body in a bathtub? And then the guys that have to come in and clean that up. Do you reckon they get trigger warnings? What about dudes in the army and the navy and the military and shit? You reckon they get trigger warnings? No, they get blown the fuck up and shot to shit. But these motherfuckers can't talk about death and illness and animal abuse? Give me a break. And now the very words trigger warning are triggering. It's got to be content note. How long until the words content note are triggering? We're going to have to change it to something else slightly more fluffy in about 10 years, you know? The advice is not prescriptive, but staff are urged to follow it to make campus an inclusive environment. Oh. The handbook says the warning should be included at appropriate points on reading lists, in course handbooks, in emails before lectures, during exams, and verbally during classes. The university has been accused of discouraging discussion about important subjects. Professor Arif Ahmed, a reader in philosophy at Cambridge, told The Telegraph students should be prepared to encounter speech that you find profoundly shocking, disturbing, or offensive. Yeah, exactly. Because it's a university, it's supposed to be setting you up for life. And life is not fluffy bunnies and teddy bears. There's no trigger warnings or content notes on real life. Dr. James Orr, an assistant professor of philosophy of religion at the university, also hit out at the guidance, saying it came close to coddling students. Close? It is coddling students, it's ridiculous. But the university defended the warning, saying content notes are not a do not read label, but enable students to take the necessary steps to engage safely and with minimal psychological distress. Oh, are you getting too much psychological distress at your world-class university that your parents have probably paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to put you through? These poor students. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse. The purpose of content notes is to facilitate engagement with challenging material rather than to encourage disengagement, the guidance reads. It also pointed out that the argument students were protected from the harsh realities of life by content notes was fundamentally flawed, because many of the students need to be protected because they have already encountered them. It said, in fact, the issue for many students is precisely that they are already well acquainted with those realities. Triggering content, you can't say triggering content, it's content note, reflects traumatic events they themselves have experienced. Yeah, I'm willing to bet not too many of these Cambridge students have experienced the tough, harsh realities of life. I mean, a sprinkling here and there, sure. Maybe some have, but I bet they're the motherfuckers that don't need trigger warnings or content notes. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the actual guidance. So here's the authors. Emma Carey. Emma Carey is a PhD student at Newham College, studying the effects of psychological trauma on mental health, and works as a research assistant within the Department of Psychiatry. Emrys Travis. Oh, look at Emrys. She's already gone for that sort of grey-blue hair. It's like she's already 70. And I've got no clue what's up with these eyes, but she looks stoned as fuck. At least get some clear eyes before you get your mugshot taken. Emrys Travis is a master's student in comparative literature and cultures at St John's College and was disabled students officer in 2018 and 19. Well, that seems about right, because if you need a content note on anything that might make you feel slightly uncomfortable, you seem a little bit disabled. So it says, in summary, a content note is a verbal or written notice that precedes potentially sensitive content. They flag content which may be distressing to anyone, particularly those with related experiences, and or triggering to those with PTSD or similar mental health conditions. Remember when PTSD was something that people brought home from war? It wasn't brought on from like sexual harassment or some airy-fairy bullshit like that. I mean, if you've been full-on sexually assaulted or physically abused in some way, yeah, sure, you might have PTSD. But I don't think the way to get past that is to be mollycoddled by content notes and trigger warnings. Content notes allow people the opportunity to prepare themselves in an informed way to engage with a given piece of material. Content notes are sometimes referred to as trigger warnings. Not anymore. Trigger warnings is bad. Trigger warnings will trigger PTSD amongst Cambridge University students. This guide uses content notes as a more neutral, descriptive term. Well, it's not really a more descriptive term. Content note sounds like a table of contents or like footnotes in some kind of textbook or something like that. Benefits for other students. Minoritized students. I've never heard that term, minoritized. Oh, hi, my name's Akbal and I am a minoritized student. As well as students with mental health conditions, we believe that content notes can play a crucial role in helping to level the playing field for minoritised students of all kinds. As part of the university's commitment to inclusivity in teaching, this is supported by the data from our survey of disabled students at the university, as a minority of students without mental health conditions nonetheless reported that they would or might benefit from content notes. What? Why? You need a content note now because of the colour of your skin? Like, how's that going to work? Content note. We're talking about black people. If you're a black person, just take note. Because if we even think about the colour of your skin, or the fact that you are of a different race, that's violence. And you need a trigger warning or a content note. This student says, when content notes were used, I felt a lot more engaged and could practice controlled recall of the related incidents/memories. And actually then they converted to lived experience and became very useful in discussion. The traumatic incidents weren't a barrier, but became opportunities for insight. Content notes allow people to find strength in what they've been through and be respected as learners who exist in the real world, not just in abstract. Student interviewee, education. This other student says, generally speaking, content notes also provide a validation for a given topic. We respect that addressing this may bring you trauma, understandably so, and we are trying to avoid this happening so you can bring it productively to the table if you choose. Student interviewee, education. Pussified. Oh man, this just seems so pathetic. Like I keep saying, they're gonna have to enter the real world one day. The real world's not gonna give you fucking content notes. Harden the fuck up. As I said, I'll be interested in seeing where this goes in another 10 years. Content notes? Content notes will be offensive then. They'll have to come up with some other bullshit term so they can protect the sensibilities and the comfort and the security of their students. Anyway, I just thought this was funny. I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you in the next one. Won't be long. Goodbye, ta-ta. Recession!